Thank you for tuning in to the NCTC Kentucky Proud Plated Up Recipe of the Month. Today we are going to be making a Greek spaghetti squash recipe. So our featured produce is going to be spaghetti squash. So our farmers markets are beginning to transition into the different fall produce they have, and with that they are going to have different types of winter squash. So winter squash consists of pumpkin, spaghetti squash, butternut squash, acorn squash, cushaw, and a lot of other varieties are out there at your farmers market. So first things first, I picked out my spaghetti squash at my local farmers market. This one is a rather small spaghetti squash that you see. They also come a little bit bigger. If you would like more, or you need to feed more people in your family, you can choose a bigger one than this. I have washed my hands for 20 seconds, and I washed my spaghetti squash, and I washed all the produce that I'm going to use in this recipe today. I also heated my oven to 150 degrees, and I baked this spaghetti squash for 35 minutes. Depending on the oven that you have, you might need to bake your spaghetti squash more or less. And how you figure out if your spaghetti squash is done is you can take a fork and you want it to easily puncture the outside of the squash, because these squash are really hard. So I've already baked this for 35 minutes on 350 degrees. The next thing that my recipe calls for is it says to take a paper towel, and we are going to put it in our bowl. Spaghetti squash are juicy when you cook them, and so for this recipe we want to make sure that we get all of the juice out of the squash. So I'm going to pick up my spaghetti squash, and then I'm going to take my fork and see how easily it comes out. It looks just like spaghetti. So we're going to scoop all of the inside of this squash into this bowl. And there we go. Oh, it is coming out so nicely. This is also another way that you know that we have cooked the spaghetti squash all the way, is it comes out easily. If maybe it's undercooked, you have to scrape your squash really hard, it doesn't come out as easily. So if that's the case, then you might need to pop it back in your oven for a few more minutes. And you can see that this makes, you know, for being a smaller size squash, this has quite a bit of ingredients in it. So now we are going to take another paper towel and put it on top, and we are just going to squish it. This might be a fun activity if you have kids at home, for that kind of let them help you out cooking dinner. I know when we make this recipe at home, my little girl thinks that this is really fun to do, and she enjoys this. So I've took my paper towel and I have squashed literally all the ingredients out of this squash and the water. So next, we're just going to let this sit in our bowl a few minutes, and we are going to move over to our skillet. So our recipe says that we need to turn our skillet on medium, and we are going to add 2 tablespoons of olive oil in there. And then our recipe says that we are going to use 1 onion. It doesn't matter whatever type of onion you have on hand. You might have a purple onion, a white onion, a green onion, whatever onion that you choose. So we're going to stick this in our skillet. Next, our recipe calls for a bell pepper. In this recipe, it actually calls for a green bell pepper. We did not have a green bell pepper at our grocery store, so I decided that I would use red. Now we are going to add in our tomatoes. So this says 1 1/2 cup of the tomato. And the good thing is even though we are in the month of September, most of your farmers markets will typically have some tomatoes, and it's still onion season, so you can also get onions at your farmers market. So we're going to let this cook just a few minutes, and you want to cook this until the onions get translucent or clear. That means that you've cooked them long enough. And so while this is cooking, then I'm going to add some more of my ingredients. So it says that I need to add some oregano. So this is my oregano. So this is 1 teaspoon of oregano that I'm going to add. I'm going to sprinkle it all over. Make sure everything gets covered. Next, my recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of basil. Now you can use fresh. Actually, the recipe does call for fresh. It calls for 2 tablespoons of fresh basil, but I decided to go with what I had on hand. So I already had different herbs and spices in my pantry, and so I wanted to utilize what I had so that it didn't cost me any more money at the grocery store. So feel free to use substitutions like that. Next, it calls for minced garlic. Once again, I didn't have any minced garlic in my pantry, so I'm going to use a teaspoon of just garlic powder in here. I'm going to give this a good mix, and we're going to let this sit for just a second and cook. And then our recipe also calls for spinach. So our recipe calls for it calls for 1 cup of spinach. And if you notice, my spinach has been chopped up. So the recipe tells us to wash our spinach and chop it up. The reason why we're going to chop it up is because we don't want big old chunks going into our Greek style spaghetti squash recipe. So look at all of these pretty colors. We have white and we have red and we have green and the yellow with the spaghetti squash. So the My Plate tells us that we need to eat a variety of vegetables. We need to have color in our plate. And so I don't know about you, but this is bringing out a lot of different colors. With that being said, this is going to add a lot of vitamins and minerals into your diet. We're using a lot of vegetables. So in Kentucky, unfortunately, we don't eat enough vegetables in our diet like we should. So this is going to be a way that whether you have a child or just somebody in your household, if you cook this recipe, you're going to be able to meet your vegetable serving. Also, while this is cooking, a good way that you can pick out a spaghetti squash is you want to find one that is free of blemishes. So you can see this one has just a little bit of blemish, but this is because I was cooking with it. So you also want your spaghetti squash to be heavy when you pick it up. You want it to be free of bruises. You also want to make sure that your spaghetti squash doesn't have any nicks in it, that there is no part of the outside that is bruised. If you find that at whether you shop at the grocery store or the farmer's market, then you would want to put that squash back on the shelf or back in the bin and get you another spaghetti squash. Another great thing about your spaghetti squash is they last a while. So maybe there is a sale at the farmer's market or your grocery store. Spaghetti squash can last at least a month in a cool, dry space. Sometimes they last a little bit longer than a month. So if there's a great sale, this is an item that you can stock up on and you can put it on your pantry and you don't have to worry about spoilage. So our spinach is cooked down. And now we are going to add all of our ingredients together. So we are going to put our ingredients in here. We want to make sure that we get all of the herbs and spices that we put in here out. This is going to be my favorite part. We're going to toss it together. Mix it all up. Let me get my tongs, those will work a little bit better. Whoop. Oh man, look at all the pretty colors in this recipe. Oh, this is beautiful. It kind of reminds me, even though we're in fall, it reminds me of Christmas a little bit with the red and green. And then lastly, it says that we are going to use 3/4 a cup of feta cheese. And I don't know about you, but I did a little bit more cheese because I love feta cheese. I think this could even be good if you wanted to add some blue cheese in there. So look at, oh man, this recipe just pops and there's all kinds of flavors in here. And so this is our recipe of the month. This is our Greek style spaghetti squash. You can contact Barry at NCTV if you would like the recipe, and you can always contact your local extension office if you are interested in this recipe. You can also go to Plated Up Kentucky Proud in search of more recipes that feature Kentucky produce, and we look forward to seeing you next month for another recipe.